At number 10 we have a close call. Now this video will probably scare the hell out of some people, but I think of this as just the perfect representation of how close you can get to sharks without having them tear you to pieces. Now that is a little freaky. That's a hammerhead shark, and you can see it sweeps in very close, and it looks like it's gonna take a chunk out of our diver, but then he's okay. Coming in at number 9 we have the cornfield. It should be no surprise that we are doing a list about Men in Black, and we got a point about a cornfield. Aliens love cornfields for whatever reason. Maybe they land in a cornfield, they scoop up a bunch of corn, then they make popcorn and that they can eat while they watch humans freak out because they landed in a cornfield. That seems like the perfect circle of entertainment. But this point was thrown on top of Reddit by Redditor Muffins for Petey. They said that they grew up on a farm and one night they saw something fly down from the sky and hover right above their farm. It was shaped like a rectangle and looked like it was glowing light, like a massive glowing log in the sky. Well then this thing just vanished. Almost as fast as it came, it was gone. They must have only needed a little bit of popcorn. The next day there was a knock at the door. It was two men in black suits and they had dark glasses on. They said that they needed to inspect the farm because there was a supposed gas leak. It was very strange because mostly everything on the farm was run by solar energy. These two men had government identification but gave them very little information as to what they were going to do. They just told them that they needed to stay in their home or they were going to be arrested for endangering people. So they listened, and then these two dudes poked around for a little bit and then they were off. They never said if they found anything or fixed a gas leak. The whole thing was just very suspicious. And guys, make sure you hit that like button because it really helps us out. Coming in at number 8 we have Dan Shoesmith. A diving instructor was leading a shark dive and everything seemed to be going as planned. He took his group down to the bottom of the ocean, they kneeled in the sand, and the sharks started to swim around them. The time underwater was finishing up and they started to ascend to the surface. Now normally the sharks would swim away at this point, but they started to follow the group to the surface. Not only that, but it seemed that they were getting closer. Dan got his group of divers to huddle together and stick their fins out to create some distance in case the sharks got close. He then filled a safety buoy full of air and sent it to the surface so the boats would know that he was approaching the surface. When he did this, one of the sharks chased the buoy to the surface. The group of divers waited about 10 meters below the surface for what would have felt like an eternity, but eventually the sharks left and they were able to safely exit the water. Coming in at number 7 we have the Jaws encounter. I had to put a movie one on this list, especially this movie. Think about what your chances of running into a shark are. How much time you spend around water. I know some people who are even afraid of swimming in pools because they think something is going to try and eat them, and this is largely part of this movie. Jaws gave generation after generation an irrational fear of sharks. And yes, it's an irrational fear because you'll see someone who's afraid of sharks wolf down a bunch of high fructose corn syrup like diabetes isn't licking its lips. Steven Spielberg has even said if he could go back in time, he wouldn't make Jaws because it demonized sharks in such a way. But the opening scene of this movie where a girl is getting munched down to that famous Donna, Donna, Donna is still one of the most iconic movie moments ever. It just sucks that so many people became afraid of something that they will probably never see in real life. Coming in at number 6 we have the Australian kayakers. A couple of mates off the coast of Australia were going for a nice kayak ride when they got an unexpected visitor. These guys didn't get a bump like Julie Wolfe, but almost like it was pulled right out of a movie. They saw a fin behind them trailing them, waiting to see if one of them was foolish enough to tip over their kayak. The two men were a little frightened, but they just decided they would wait it out. One of the men later described the encounter as a dog coming to check out what was going on. They didn't have a lot of options to scare off their curious friend, so they went with slapping the water with their paddles. Turns out that worked perfectly. Coming in at number 5 we have Cops vs. Sharks. No, this isn't the title of the new motion picture that's going to be coming out this fall. It's actually an incident that happened in Australia. It should be no surprise that Australia has back-to-back slots on a list about shark encounters. Well, a couple of police were responding to something that had them out on a little dinghy. I don't know what kind of water crime that could be, but they were out on a very small boat and a 16-foot great white shark swam by the boat. I don't think there's anything in the police training manual about that. Coming at number 4 we have when Sam Jackson got eaten by a shark. Okay, just one more movie one on the list. This one is my favorite Sam Jackson movie moment ever. Sam Jackson is trying to rally the troops in the movie Deep Blue Sea. It's a moment of motivation. It seems like everything is about to turn around. But here's the thing about Deep Blue Sea. It's more of a horror movie than an action movie. And when things seem like they're starting to get good in a horror movie, you know they're about to get so much worse. That clip is so funny. A bunch of them got wetsuits on and everyone is glistening with sweat for some reason. I love every second of it. Cheesy deaths in movies are some of my favorite things. Alright, let's move back to real people getting eaten by sharks. Coming in at number 3, we have bathroom break. You know, if you're tucked away in a cage, the shark will find some way to get to you. A group of divers were down in a cage taking some photos of a massive shark swimming by when this underwater king hit them with one of these. I don't think you can smell it because you're underwater, but that poop is going to cover every inch of you. You're gonna have poop under your fingernails, poop in your eyebrows. You are gonna become one with the poop. Coming in at number 2, we have scarier than it looks. There wasn't a lot that people watching could do in our next clip. They're just standing around watching in horror. Yeah, it looks like that shark is gonna flip over that little kayak and eat that dude like he's downing a Glizzy Gladiator hot dog. But here's the thing, that's a basking shark. They only eat plankton. They don't even have teeth. So even though that looks like it would be terrifying to be in the water with, it's really just a big vegan swimming out there. And coming in at the number 1 spot, we have the cage won't protect you. The thing about shark diving is you want to ensure you're going to see a shark, so sometimes you bring bait. And the bait can get the sharks a little bit excited. A lot of people will go into a cage to try and avoid contact with the shark. But here's the thing about sharks. They are basically a spine, a jaw, and then all muscle and cartilage. So sometimes they can squeeze into very small spaces and you can have something like this happen.
He's in the cage. Oh my god.
Here's something interesting about that clip. There was a diver in the cage with the shark. The shark is thrashing all over the place. You have blood in the water. Eventually the shark works its way out of the cage and then the diver returns to the surface and signals that he is okay, and walks away without a scratch and the most amazing story to tell at a party.
Starting us off with number 10 is The Hand. This one's from Steven Wagner, who said his dad told him the story. So back in 1942 in Juarez, Mexico, his dad was around 20 years old and he went to a circus that was visiting town. His younger brother came along and they didn't really go to see the acts, they were more interested in the freak shows. Disappointed after seeing the performers, they were about to leave with 2 girls when they ran into a short, stubby man. The stranger introduced himself as the greatest illusionist in the world. That's quite a hefty title. When asked if he was part of the circus, the man said the owner turned him down because his act was so frightening. The owner said he was Satan himself. Once he had their attention, he invited them back to his trailer in order to show them the act. Once inside, the stranger put a glove on his right hand, started running his left hand over his right while wiggling his fingers. He then started chanting bizarre words, and when he took the glove off, everyone's jaws just dropped. The stranger's hand was completely skeletal. He turned it, let them see the back, it was completely real. His brother went to take a closer look and the man grabbed his head and said he was really about to show them something now, and at this point everybody shat themselves and made a run for it. The stranger came out onto his porch laughing, and on the floor nearby was a bed of long nails pointing up which he jumped onto. Weird flex, but okay. Blood started coming out of his feet, but he was still just laughing it off. And from that day onwards, Stephen's father and brother knew they had met Satan. Coming in at number 9 is Father URBAIN Grandie. Now Father URBAIN was a Roman Catholic priest that lived in the Lodin part of France. He was under major scrutiny and received a lot of criticism for ignoring his celibacy vow. If anything, he was known for having sexual relations with many women and as someone who had an elevated sense of lustful depravity. By 1632, he was accused of sending the the demon Asmodai to enchant a group of Ursuline nuns into committing evil acts and becoming his sex slaves, you know, as priests do. After numerous nuns made accusations of seduction against him, he was arrested, then acquitted, and then re-arrested. During his second arrest, he was tortured by judges, after which they revealed a contract they found in his bedroom, which indicated he had signed a deal with Satan and many other demons. They saw it as evidence of him making a diabolical pact and convicted him of witchcraft and sentenced him to death. He was burnt at the stake. At number 8 we have A Better Life. This one's from Redditor Kodas_gaming, who said he had a really rough upbringing. His father abandoned his family and his mother was a heroin addict. He used to see her getting beat to a pulp, after which she'd take her frustrations out on him. CPS ended up taking him and his brother away, but a few years later his mum was clean and back with their dad and they regained custody. Sort of happy ending, kind of, but not really. They lived in a small house in central Texas, and according to the user, the house had a terrifying aura. Anytime he was home, he felt like he was being watched, especially in the bathroom, and he would have regular nightmares. And at this point in his life, his mum was working herself to death because their dad was a lazy slob who did nothing. She got so depressed she tried to take her own life, and desperate to help, the user started praying to God every single day. But nothing changed. He realized for something to change, perhaps he could call on the demonic entity that engulfed his house rather than God. He researched satanic rituals for ages and finally found the one he needed. While his family were out for ice cream one day, he got on his knees, wax coming down the candles he'd lit, and cut his hand and started drawing symbols on the ground in his blood. Obviously while crying the whole time, because who wouldn't cry after doing that? He recited the words and made the deal. And right after he did that, a cold breeze swept through the house and everything went black. But he was pretty much unfazed because he expected something like that to happen, so he went to bed that night and had the worst nightmare ever. He saw himself in the reflection of the mirror in the bathroom with corpse grey skin, bloody tears, and his eyes were crimson as well. There was a noose around his neck and his hair was bloody. During the dream he thought, this can't be me, and then the reflection started laughing, saying, "It is now, you made the deal." He woke up in the bathtub covered in scratches and scars, and it just kept happening and getting worse. 1 month later he started seeing things, hearing things, his nail beds began to recede and bleed, his canines became sharper and his tongue used to get cut out of nowhere, and he started full on hallucinating and having visions of the past, of native people being slaughtered. And how did that even happen? I don't even know. And what did he get out of all of this? Other than his mum getting a high paying job, not much at all. So moral of the story, know what you're getting into before you ask the devil for help. Filling our number 7 slot is Joseph Smith. Now Joseph was a Mormon prophet in the early 1800s who claimed he encountered Satan before he saw Christ for the first time. We have both big shots in one story, how about that? The story goes that despite never doing this before, one day he just decided he was going to pray to God out loud. He went into the woods on a sunny day and knelt down and began to pray. I don't know why he went into the woods, he could have just done it in his house, but okay. But as soon as he did, he said he felt he was seized by a power that engulfed him entirely. He said it was so powerful he tried to speak but felt like his tongue was bound. A thick darkness surrounded him and he thought for sure he was going to die. And I mean, fair enough for being realistic. If I felt that, I'd probably think I was gonna die too. He was ready to sink into this despair that was around him, but in one final hope he used all his strength to call on God to get him out of Satan's hold. Then all of a sudden he saw a huge pillar of light over his head which came down on him. As the light rested on him, he saw 2 personages in the air above him and everything was fine again. At least this one had a happy ending, sort of. Now at number 6 is Madame LaLaurie. Delphine LaLaurie has been mentioned many times on this channel, but just a quick recap for you. She was a big Creole socialite in New Orleans. To the public, that is. Inside her house, she tortured and killed the majority of her slaves in a way you can't even imagine. In 1834, a house fire took over her mansion, and that's when she got exposed because authorities found bodies upon bodies of bound or mutilated slaves. One's stomach had been cut open and his intestines were wrapped around his neck. A bucket was also found with various organs from various slaves. A bucket. That's how much mass killing the woman was doing, that she needed a bucket for all the organs she was harvesting. Anyway, with some stroke of luck, she managed to escape New Orleans and go to France, but many believe she didn't just escape due to luck. She invented a religion involving voodoo and black magic, and on top of that, people vehemently believe she made a pact with the devil in order to be able to still be wealthy, still be free, and escape whilst committing these horrendous acts. I mean, for me, it was either the devil pact or she paid a lot of important money to let her go. What do you guys think? Coming in at number 5 is the Satanic Cult. This one's from Brad, who said back in 2005, him and his friends spent one summer TPing a lot of houses. In the town they grew up, there were always rumors of a satanic cult that operated around a 10-minute drive away. So one day they decided to go check it out and TP it. Ballsy move, I have to say. The 5 friends went there the day before moon, which I guess is a part of every scary story you hear nowadays, and they bypassed the fence and ended up in a garden enclosure and heard an eerie high-pitched sound. Ignoring it, they continued to explore, found an old locked church, and found nothing else and decided to leave. Bit anticlimactic, but just stay with me. When they got to their car, their key, which was working perfectly 10 minutes prior, just stopped working. The car alarm started going off and then it magically just unlocked by itself. They piled in and drove off, and mid-drive the lights in the car just went off. The driver didn't press anything to cause it, it just happened. Panicked, they rushed home, and when Brad got to his front porch, he found 3 identical black cats. Keep in mind he lives a good 25 miles away from the cult, so how did these cats even get to his house? He took the cats as a bad omen and decided to take the cats a few miles out of town and leave them there, and the whole drive he was being followed by 2 black cars despite taking small dirt roads. Now I don't know if people were just messing with him here or the satanic cult was there and they saw him and everything was their doing, but either way, it's scary and it's creepy. At number 4 is Giuseppe Tartini. Now from the name, doesn't he just sound like a brilliant Italian musician of some kind? His name just has the ring to it, you know? Anyway, Tartini was an Italian composer and violinist during the Baroque period. He was very influential in Italy, but he was also known for his huge inferiority complex and uncontrollable temper. And I can just see that equaling to a lot of smashed violins. But anyway, the story goes that one day Tartini heard Francesco Verrocchini playing the violin better than him, and he was fuming and also dissatisfied with his own skills. The event made him spiral into depression for months, and in that time he worked in solitude and practiced the violin for 12 hours a day. During this period, it's said he had a dream in which the devil appeared and he met him. He appeared at the foot of his bed and played a sonata on the violin like he invented the damn activity. He offered him success in all his musical dreams in exchange for his soul. Did he accept? Well, it was never really confirmed, but when he woke up the next day, he wrote down as much of the sonata as he could, but no matter how many times he played it, it just wasn't as good as the devil's version. If you want to check it out, the sonata in question is called the Devil's Trill Sonata, his most well-known piece, and it's quite hard to play even by today's standards. But the fact he could never play it as well as the devil, I mean, doesn't that just indicate he wasn't successful in everything he wanted to be? So am I the only one identifying this major plot hole we have going on? Did he accept? Did he not? Let me know, Tartini. Filling our number 3 slot is Gemma Galgani. Gemma was an Italian mystic, later saint, in Italy during the late 19th century. She believed that the devil was waging a personal war against her. She said he loved giving her horrible headaches to the point she couldn't even pray. I mean, honestly, I just feel like that was a bad migraine, but moving on. She went on to say that once she was writing at her desk alone and the devil came and dragged her from the table by her hair with such force that her hair came out in clumps. In another attack, the devil took the form of a big black dog and put his paws on her shoulders, making her whole body ache all over. And in another one, she was drinking holy water and he twisted her arms so backwards that she fell to the ground in pain. If that's not bad enough, she said he even took on the form of people she trusted or knew, and once he even took the form of an angel. The worst incident though was when he started giving her blows to the head. She ran to her room but found him there with a rope. He kept trying to get her to give in to the wickedness and she kept resisting, and so he kept kept striking her with the rope as she was on the ground. He then threw her on the bed, then dragged her from it and violently smashed her head against the ground, and she passed out. Just imagine all this happening in your room and no one's there to help you. I'd be terrified. But I'm also curious as to what form the devil took when he attacked her all those times, and if anybody was around, were they seeing this happen? Was she being attacked by an invisible force? Like, what was happening here? Now at number 2 is Steve. This one's from Redditor Shabby Boa, whose real name is Steve and who used to be a trucker for 30 years. One night after a drop off, he was on his way back home when he stopped at a diner to pee. It was completely empty, no customers, no staff, absolutely no one. He quickly peed, and when he came out, a grey-haired man was sitting at the bar. He told Steve he owned the diner and gave him food and a drink. When he got up to leave, the man said food is not what you truly desired tonight. Waited out, Steve left and got into his truck. About an hour and a half later, he had to pee again. Steve, you've got a small bladder, mate, and saw another small diner which he stopped at. He went inside and again it was completely empty save a grey-haired man at the bar. It was the same man who said nice to have you back, Steve, as soon as he walked in. Steve got pissed at this point, thinking he was being screwed over by this guy, and demanded to know what the guy wanted. He said he was trying to help Steve. He started asking about Steve and how he used to have a family. Steve told him his wife and daughter died in a house fire years ago caused by faulty wiring. But the man questioned him, saying it wasn't just faulty wiring. The faulty wiring was a happy coincidence that just so happened to have happened the same time Steve left a lit cigarette in the house. Steve fought with him more, and in the end the man offered him a deal. He said he could bring back his wife and daughter in exchange for his soul after he died. Thinking it was complete bullshit, he agreed and left the diner. Before he did, he asked the man who he was, to which he responded, I am the devil. That night he got home as if he never stopped anywhere at all, and when he entered the house, he heard his wife say, Steve, is that you? And the small footsteps of his daughter. He was so excited, but when they came down the stairs, their skin was charred black. Chunks of it were falling off, their clothes had fused and melted with their skin, and Steve could barely hold in his puke. And at that point he'd realized he'd made the biggest mistake ever, and that the next 30 years were literally gonna be hell. And finally, at number 1 is the man. This one's from VR Greg, who said she met the devil for the first time when she was 8 years old. She was walking through a forest on her way home from school when she encountered a black-haired man in a shabby suit. Except one foot of his was a goat hoof and the other was a rooster claw. She could see them when she looked at him directly, but peripherally they looked completely normal. She took him for a walk and then he left. By the time she was a teenager, she assumed the counter was maybe a dream, or maybe that she just imagined the whole thing. But one day she was watching a news story about a man who got away with killing his wife, and as they showed the judge announcing the not guilty verdict, the murderer turned around and smiled at a man behind him who wasn't his lawyer. She recognized him right away. Black hair, shabby suit, hadn't aged a day. Her parents threw her a surprise 16th birthday to which nobody came to, which is just really sad. I'm sorry that happened to you. She ran home crying, and she knew no one came because her classmate Erin had her party the same day just to spite her. That night she slept thinking about all the horrible ways Erin deserved to be punished, and the next day at the breakfast table her dad looked shaken. He told her that Erin had been found dead in the park. She met the devil the same day in her room, and he told her she had wanted it to happen and he executed it for her. He offered her a deal, but thankfully the one piece of common sense that 90% of people possess is knowing that you should never make a deal with the devil, so she didn't. The girl didn't see him again until the funeral of her mother, where he told her the doctors lied to her about her mother dying peacefully, that it was agony and that no one was around to help her. She started immediately screaming, and her dad ran over to her and made her sit down. When she asked him where the black-haired man was, he said, "You were standing alone, honey," and just started screaming out of nowhere. Shivers. That gave me shivers.
Starting us off this countdown, we have Harold Dahl. This is supposedly the real life story that inspired the movie Men in Black. So on June 27th, 1947, Harold Dahl, his young son, and his dog went out on a conservation mission. While out on the fishing boat, they saw 6 donut-shaped aircrafts hovering in the air above them. The crafts then started dropping weird molten type waste onto the lake. He described it as if it was raining lava or white metal. This ended up hitting his son's arm and the dog. The son was badly injured and sadly the dog didn't survive. When this happened, Harold managed to take a picture of the aircraft. The following morning, he was visited by a man in a black suit at a local diner. The man apparently threatened Harold to delete the photo, and he was told to not talk about the incident. But this story has been retold so many times that the facts are now jumbled. Some say that it was his son that got his arm burnt on the alien lava, but in another story, it was his co-workers, so I don't even know what to think.
Coming in at number 9, we have Julie Wolfe. When you think of a canoe trip, you think about peace and calm waters. Every time I get into a canoe, I think I'm in a rom-com and I'm randomly gonna run into Jennifer Aniston and then we're gonna fall in love next to a campfire. Well, Julie Wolfe didn't have that experience at all. Julie was riding her canoe off the coast of California when she got rocked by something strange. It felt as if she had bumped into a rock, but she was way out in the ocean, so there was no way she could have run into land. Turns out it was a great white shark. Yeah, that doesn't sound like a great time to me. Well, it got even worse when the shark bit into her canoe. This tore a hole into it, but Julie still had some time. She started to paddle back to shore and was able to get back to land before the whole thing sunk into the ocean. On the shark's side, he probably thought he was getting a nice snack and then he just got a mouthful of carbon fiber. That's like when you put some Kraft cheese on your burger but you forget to take the plastic off.
In our 8th spot, we have Shane SOVAR. This next encounter happened fairly recently. So on October 14th, 2008, hotel manager Shane SOVAR had been informed by a security guard at his hotel that he had seen a UFO from the hotel. 2 weeks later, hotel staff were panicked when 2 strange men entered the hotel in search of Shane and the security guard. Shane, wanting to see who these men were, checked the security footage. And sure enough, 2 men in black suits wearing a hat could be seen wandering the hotel. The men didn't have any hair and looked fairly strange. Yeah, I'm thinking they were like aliens disguised as humans.
Coming in number 7, we have the footage. If you ever get some hardcore evidence that aliens are real, you better put that stuff on a hard drive and beeline it to the border, because there is no way that you're going to upload that stuff without having men in black come down on you. I grabbed this story off an Alien Encounter subreddit, and the person writing it said they for real saw a UFO fly above them and then zoom off like a laser, and they managed to get it on video. The first thing they went to do was upload it to the internet, but all of the sudden they had no signal. This was in the middle of the night and they were all alone, and then out of nowhere 2 men in black were standing right behind them. They had their faces covered and guns pointed at him. They demanded the phone, and as soon as he gave it to them, he passed out. He woke up in the drunk tank and was apparently being belligerent, but he hadn't drank anything that night and his phone was still missing.
And at number 6, we have the Spaceman photo. In 1964, Jim Templeton spent the day taking photos of his wife and daughter in a field. But when he got the photos developed, he saw something quite strange in the background of his daughter's photo. It appeared to be a spaceman right by her daughter. The only other people that had been there that day were some older ladies. Of course, people didn't believe the photo to be real, but an analyst at Kodak confirmed that the photo was real and hadn't been tampered with. Even creepier, after Jim's story made big news, he was visited by 2 government agents, 2 men in suits that referred to themselves as number 9 and 10. They then demanded to see where the photo was taken, and he was heavily questioned about that day. When Jim told them he never saw the figure in person, the men became angry and drove away. Pretty sus.
Coming in at number 5, we have Albert K. Bender. It turns out dedicating your life to flying saucers is nothing new. Albert K. Bender was the founder of the International Flying Saucer Bureau. This place was leading the field in investigative work when it came to finding out what the government knew about aliens. In 1955, he wrote a paper that was detailing everything the government was doing with aliens, and it was ready to be published in the Space Review. But that would change when he was visited by some men in black. They teleported into his room late one night and had the psychic ability to talk to him through their minds. They manipulated him to destroy his research, and that was that. He would never go on to touch anything to do with aliens after this point.
Moving on to number 4, we have Jack and Mary Robinson. Back in 1968, Jack and his wife Mary were both UFO researchers. Didn't even know that was a job, but where can I apply? But the more they researched into aliens and UFOs, the more weird stuff began to happen. One time they returned home to find that their house had been searched. All their files regarding UFOs and aliens had been tampered with. Then things started to get worse. Mary started noticing a man that would stand outside their apartment and watch them. The man was always wearing a black suit and a hat. In fact, they managed to capture a photo of him. Mary had told her friend what was happening, and the friend drove over and saw the man for herself and took a photo of him. It's so freaky.
Coming in number 3, we have the night visitors. I'm on the fence when it comes to meeting aliens. Like, of course I would want to meet aliens, but it would have to be the right setting. Like in a park or at a party or a big reveal event like they do with the latest iPhone. Steve Cook is like, now I give you the alien. But the way this next story goes wouldn't be my ideal circumstance. Reddit user Chop Stew told a story of an alien encounter that brought a man in black into his life. It all happened super fast. He woke up in the middle of the night and there were 5 tall gray beings standing around his bed. He was in a haze, then he started to panic, but before he could even speak, he was back asleep. He woke up the next morning feeling a little bit rattled. Whatever he saw last night seemed so real, but it couldn't have been. It must have been a strange dream. The next day at work, he was called into HR, but there was a new person working. This lady had just come in for the day from head office. She wanted to just talk about his personal life. They chatted for a bit and then she asked him about his dreams. He could feel the hair on the back of his neck stand up when she posed the question. He didn't give in and kept the alien sighting to himself. The next day, the regular HR person was back and he never found out who this replacement was and why they wanted to speak to him and how they knew about what had just happened to him the night before. So this time, it was a lady in black.
In our second spot, we have Dr. Herbert Hopkins. Back in the day, a man named Dr. Hopkins was working as a consultant on a UFO case in Maine. Again, I didn't know that was a job. That was until one day he received a phone call from someone claiming to be part of the UFO community. Again, didn't know that was a thing. He asked if he could visit Dr. Hopkins to discuss the case. Hopkins agreed and he was greeted by an intimidating man wearing a black suit and black tie. Apparently, this guy was extremely pale with no hair or eyebrows. As soon as the man entered Hopkins' home, his dog went berserk, just started barking at him. The man then basically interrogated Hopkins to see how much he knew. Before leaving though, he told Hopkins that there were 2 coins in his pocket, Hopkins' pocket. He then told him to reach into one of his pockets and retrieve it. He did it and then he said to hold the coin in his hand and look at it closely. Within a few seconds, the coin started to go in and out of focus before disappearing completely from his hand. He then said that the coin would never be seen on this plane again. It gets weirder. The man then asked him if he was familiar with a man named Barney Hill. Barney Hill was a man that said he was abducted by a UFO. He died from cerebral hemorrhage. When Hopkins said yes, he knew of him, the man said, Barney didn't have a heart, just like you no longer have a coin. Basically implying that he's got the power to kill him. And honestly, he probably killed Barney. Hopkins was then told to get rid of every file he had on the UFO case. And he did as he was told. He burned every shred of evidence. Watch, now the men in black are gonna come after me and Shay for this video. Just saying.
Again, coming to the number 1 spot, we have a message from the future. Now, who knows if this is true? It's fun to believe stories like the one I'm about to tell you because it makes life a little bit more interesting. But a story I snagged online spoke of someone who started to receive messages on their phone. They were from an unknown number, but they had details about things that seemed to be random. The messages would be like, a man in a plaid shirt will buy a coffee with 2 creams and 2 sugars next to you and forget his wallet. Like, okay, but what does that mean? But then these events started happening. It was like these texts were coming from the future. So he started to respond to them, but the person would never communicate outside of these messages that were hints from the future. But why was this coming to our random writer? Well, we never found out because one day a black van pulled up next to him and 4 men in black suits jumped out and told him that he was under arrest. They put him in the van and then took him to a police station. They searched him, took his phone, he was detained for a few hours and then released and was given everything except for his phone. They said it got lost and they would send it to him when they found it, but he never got his phone back, and from there, the messages just stopped.